Hi, my name is Rebecca Lee, and I co-wrote this book, The Mercury Detoxification Manual, with Andy Cutler, PhD, who should have gotten a Nobel Prize for what he figured out. So when I first figured out I had mercury toxicity, I talked about it with my chiropractor and told him about Andy Cutler and the Andy Cutler protocol. He actually knew about proper chelation and how to dose in the half-life. I said to him, I only know of one other medically trained person who knows how to do this. Why don't you specialize and get all the business? There's a lot of sick people out there with nobody to help them. This is what he told me. I don't want those kind of patients. They're very complicated cases and difficult to deal with. I repeated this to Andy, and he said, your chiropractor sounds like a sensible person. Mercury, along with everything else it does, has this added little gift of often making people mentally ill. It particularly causes anxiety disorder. And don't take my word for that. There's like 150 years of medical literature and scientific literature about that. Mental health counselors think that their clients are obsessing about mercury because they are mentally ill. Yes, they are obsessing about mercury because they are mentally ill. The thing is, though, that they are right. The mercury made them mentally ill. I was visiting my sister in Berkeley once, and I had this epiphany about my brother-in-law, who's a psychiatrist. I thought, I bet 50% of his patients are toxic with mercury. I told my friend, and she said 50%, more like 90. I asked Andy, and he agreed more like 90. I imagine he didn't talk about that much. It's hard to believe, but that is what he said. David Hammond, who wrote a book about mercury, called it the undiagnosed epidemic. And one reason that it is undiagnosed is that the people who have the problem can be weird. They arrive claiming they have mercury poisoning, and they are so weird, nobody takes them seriously. Another reason it goes undiagnosed is there are no reliable tests. Once the mercury has left the blood, it becomes unavailable to show up in tests. Practitioners who believe in the condition will do challenge tests with the chelator. Other doctors point out that these always show up with high metals and say they are fraudulent. And they're right to a certain extent about that. They almost always do show up high metals, and they are dangerous and uninformative too. We evaluate people with hair tests. One of the myriad ways that mercury makes people sick is by messing with the way minerals move back and forth across the cell walls. This will show up as deranged mineral transport, about which Andy wrote an entire textbook, this book right here, which has suffered a bit living in the tropics. So a hair test will often be useful, but if you don't understand about mercury and mineral transport, a hair test is easily misinterpreted. So to evaluate a person for chronic mercury, you mostly have to go by their exposure history, what symptoms they are manifesting, and whether they react to chelators. And as far as symptoms, these may very well include high anxiety and even outright mental illness.